Okay, today we're breaking down why every generation seems to get poorer except for one, and it's probably not the generation you're thinking about, the one everyone blames for all their problems, but let's look at some of the data first. Now, boomers own over 50% of all U.S. wealth. It's actually roughly 51%, and boomers are between, as the time I'm recording this, between 61 and 79 years old. And the majority, or most of the boomers living right now, are either about to retire or well into their retirement. Now, what we know is that peak value of all of your wealth it is right before retirement, right? Because after that, you stop earning as much unless you're living off, dividends or other forms of income, and then you use that to live into retirement. So boomers own over half. Gen X owns roughly 25% of all wealth in the U.S. And then I don't have the data for the silent generation, which are the older generation previous to boomers, but they own about 12% of the wealth for those who are still alive. Okay, Gen X is closing in on stability. So they own 25 to 26% of the wealth. They're right now between 45 and 60 years old, which data shows that peak earning capacity is in your mid-40s. So the younger Gen X are earning the most money they ever have, and they have certain advantages that other generations don't. Okay. Now, millennials. Unfortunately, I am a millennial. I was born in '96, so I'm technically the youngest millennial. The oldest millennials are early to mid 40s. But millennials are not really catching up. This is due to a lot of factors, economic related, but they're not really doing nearly as well as Gen X or boomers. I think they only own roughly 10 to 15% of the wealth, and that's actually combined millennials and Gen Z. Now, Gen Z, to sum them up in one word, is cooked, right? So anyone between the ages of 28 and younger are really struggling. Now in the U.S., if you have a college degree or not as a man, it does not have any impact on finding a job. So getting a college degree does not really help you get a job as much as it did the older generations. On top of that, everything's more expensive. Everything's been hyper-financialized. You have student loans. You have outrageous cost of housing, inflation, and earnings not keeping up with those. And so Gen Z, unfortunately, start behind and are looking like they're in a very tough spot. Okay, so CPI adjusted income in the U.S. So that has to do with home prices. That has to do with cost of living. That's how these are all everything else we're going to talk about. It has been calculated. So how much money are you earning, and then cost of living compared to that. And what we've seen in recent years, especially since COVID, since 2020, with almost somewhere around 40% of the U.S. dollars being printed since that time, that's caused everything to skyrocket in price. Baseline of 25% higher than 2020 and earlier. In a lot of cases, things just cost much more, and wages have not kept up with inflation. Okay, they've been roughly flat, adjusted for inflation since the 80s. Okay, so what this means really is we're at like a tipping point in society where people are going to have to start dropping their standards of living. Now, no one likes to do this, and no one even will until they are absolutely forced into this, unless you have a lot of financial discipline and humility. And so that's why we're seeing Younger millennials and Gen Z move back in with their parents, stay at home for longer, struggle to find jobs, can't afford housing, cars, food, even eating out at restaurants like Chick-fil-A, Chipotle, some of my favorites. The cost has gone up twice, 2x in the last 5 years or so. So people really feel that, and living standards are going to start dropping. It's going to become more generational homes. So grandparents, parents, and children are probably going to be living all under the same roof, and younger people are more and more not moving out until early 30s, even mid 30s. Okay, so the boomer advantage. Let's talk about this for a little bit. Boomers aged 61 to 79 got cheap housing. So the housing to income ratio when they were in the market for homes, so mid 20s, really, early 30s, was 2 to 3 times their income. So if they made $50,000 a year, a home would cost $100,000 to $150,000. That was manageable. You wouldn't even need a 30-year mortgage. You could get away with a 10-year. Some people would even put down cash and buy their home that way by the time they were almost 30. And so now, today, things are looking scary for housing affordability, income, home to income ratio. So now it's in the 8 to 12x range. So you make $100K and you think you're doing great. I make 6 figures. Well, you go to look for a house, which would be the standard, let's say 3-bed, 2-bath, and then maybe you have some other things added in there, and it's a decent neighborhood. We're looking at 8 to 12x. So a lot of people don't even make 6 figures, and they're house hunting for a house in the 500, 600, 700K range. And so I do know that the median price of homes across the U.S. Is roughly $450K, and it's gone up drastically since COVID. Okay, so all that to say, the boomers had an advantage here. They could buy a house for cheap, and I don't know if you've seen memes online where boomers could buy houses for a handful of raspberries and a handshake. That's really what it feels like today, comparatively to the home price to income ratio. Okay. Now, the boomers also had extremely cheap college tuition. College did not used to cost an arm and a leg, and you didn't have to take out student loans for decades. And so college tuition was 90% cheaper. It only cost a few $1,000s to get a college degree. Now it costs $100,000, $100K especially if you go out of state. Potentially cheaper if you go to a commuter or in-state college. But yeah, higher education, which does directly correlate with higher income, was manageable. You didn't need to take out massive loans. You could pay cash and get your 4-year degree and then get into the workplace. Okay. Boomers also benefited from the pension era. So, the standard path was go to college, get your 4-year degree, get a 9-to-5 office job. A lot of more people got married back then, and they could have 2.5 kids, have a 3-bed, 2.5-bath house in the suburbs on a half acre, and they could work the same job and not have to job hop like a lot of people do now for 40 years and then retire with a pension. So your job would continue to pay you after retirement, which is practically unheard of now. And you were good. That was simple life, right? So that's what the boomers had economically and housing and education and jobs and earnings. Those were all their legs up, right? And obviously job stability. So they wouldn't need to what is now considered an intelligent play is to job hop every 2 to 4 years, right? Get the experience, have something to put on your resume, make connections, and then hop, because jobs do not reward really staying in the same role for forever. You get a small 2 to 3% yearly raise versus job hopping. The data does show that you get a much larger raise, 5-10% roughly every time you hop companies. Okay. So yeah, also on top of that, there's been a massive asset inflation kind of boom for the boomers. And you know, if they own stock, if they own houses, if they own bonds, if they own precious metals or commodities or businesses, all of those things, inflation benefits asset owners, right? So if you already own something, inflation just brings you up. And so boomers, because they own over 50% of the wealth in the U.S., have benefited from inflation. So they're insulated. They don't even understand what the younger generations are going through, and they don't care either because they got theirs, right? So they also benefit from demographics and timing. So, you know, during the 80s especially, economic boom, lower inflation, lower cost of living, good job stability, good wages. We didn't have to compete with massive immigration. So, you know, since then, tens of millions of immigrants have come in, and they directly compete for housing, jobs, and everything in between, okay? So that's the boomer advantage. Their disadvantage is now that they're older and they can't really enjoy all of these things. So maybe they'll pass on their wealth to their children, or maybe they'll spend it all and take it to the grave, right? Millennials, the millennial trap is interesting. Now I skipped Gen X for a reason. We'll come back to it in a bit. But for millennials, myself, so age 29, 30 to mid 40s, wages are flat. For men, the median income in the U.S. is roughly $61K. For women, it is $54K, and wages for women have been increasing over the years, and millennial men have been flat since the 80s. Okay, so they're not really earning that much more, like exponentially, like previous generations. Housing, unfortunately, for everyone trying to save up as a millennial and buy housing, if they haven't already before COVID or previous years, housing is now an asset class. Everything's hyper financialized. You have BlackRock, Blackstone, large equity, private equity firms buying up houses, single families, rentals, apartment complexes, and just ratcheting up every single fee, nickeling and diming you. And so millennials are struggling with flat wages and housing that is insanely expensive, okay? Unfortunately for millennials, at this time, student loans started to explode. So now, to get your foot in the door, especially in corporate, like I work in corporate, you need to have a 4-year degree or they won't even let you in the door in a lot of cases, right? So the cost of higher education has exploded, meaning a lot of them have student loans, which for a while Biden stopped student loan payments and kicked the can down the road. Trump has now demanded that people start paying them back, so that's why we see credit card utility rates exploding and a lot of debt increasing and people having less disposable income because you need to pay down your student loans. And if you make minimum payments, there are horror stories out there where people don't pay attention. They pay the minimum payment for their student loan, and they, because of how high the interest rates are, they end up owing more than they did 10 years ago, even though they've been paying their loans for a decade, which is absolutely insane, and it drags down everything in the way of increasing your living standards. Okay, so high cost of raising children now. People complain about daycare. Some people work a full-time job just so that they could pay for the daycare of their children. And so they're trading that time with them to pay someone else just to take care of them and maybe earn a little extra for, if they're married and they have a spouse and they have dual incomes. So that's a burden. People are having fewer kids because people don't want to bring children into this world with costs being so high, right? And then on top of that, they have delayed life milestones. So they're purchasing homes less or later. The average age of home buyers in the U.S. used to be late 20s. And since COVID, it has gone up so much higher. Not first-time home buyers, but just home buyers in general is, I don't know exactly where, it's between 40 and 60. It's very sad. And so delayed milestones across the board: marriage, home ownership, getting a secure career path, saving, all of these things delayed, right? And then also, boomers are in political power. They set the policies, they decide the laws, what pass, and everyone knows that for the most part, politicians vote for their best interests, to line their pockets, to help their party members, to help their sponsors, and millennials are younger and less wealthy and have less power, so everyone younger than boomers don't necessarily benefit from the asset class owners, okay? Gen Z, I feel bad for them. I'm between Millennial and Gen Z, and so they start behind. Like I said, one word to sum them up is cooked in this market. Things could get better, but the signs are not pointing in that direction. So rent prices are insanely high for them. They cannot afford anything. A studio apartment, 1 bedroom, probably out of the question. Might not even be able to swing 3 or 4 roommates, right? And so they have declining real wages because of inflation eating up your buying power, with wages not going up, with immigration, driving up the price of homes and the competition for jobs, globalization. So you have to compete with people globally with the internet era, right? And they're stuck in between a rock and a hard place. So cost of cars, food, travel, insurance, all these things have skyrocketed, especially since COVID, right? And so because of this, a lot of Gen Z and younger millennials are just checking out. They are not really looking for jobs. They're staying at home with their parents. They are, they have declining mental health. And so they're drastically worse off than their parents and all older generations. And this is really a reversing trend and a huge warning sign with everyone before their generation did mostly better than their parents. Maybe the Great Depression was, an anomaly there. But now, with cost of living and how expensive and insane things are, Gen Z are now much, much worse off than every generation before them, which does not give them hope, okay? So, the one generation that wins is Gen X, okay? Now, they don't own as many assets as the boomers. They own actually half as many, roughly, of the wealth compared to boomers. But they're a secret winner, and let's break down why this is. So, Gen X, they're young enough to have enjoyed asset inflation and good jobs, right? They bought homes before the price to income ratio was so high. So they got their foot in the door there. They're young enough to benefit from the tech wealth with, the boom of the internet and technology and wages and investing in the stock market. So they're benefiting from that. They are not crushed by student loans for the most part if they, took the traditional path of getting a college degree first and then entering the workplace. And they have higher home ownership rates than millennials. So yes, everyone's taxes are going up, but if they bought with a lower interest rate and a lower price, they don't really have to worry about these things. So, they had a big gains from the 2010 to 2020 bull market when things were amazing back then. And they're now in their peak earning capacity, which is mid-40s, okay? So the future, really it comes down to you need to own assets or you will be left behind. The K-shaped economy is real. It's the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and we're towards the long tail effect of that, to where if you don't already have things, it is much harder to get them, to grow and build. But it's not impossible, right? We have the internet. We have limitless opportunity. You have to, yes, work harder and start behind, but there's always an opportunity to grow. So hope this video helped. Click the video appearing on your screen, and I'll see you in the next one.